welcome back to the Bank Customer Experience Podcast. I'm your host, Bradley Cooper, and I'm joined today by Mack Turner, who is a marketing and market research and analytic consultant for the banking industry. And we're here today to really talk about bank customer experience issues and opportunities in 2025. So, Mack, great to have you on today.
Thank you, and it's great to be with you and to see everyone again.
Excellent. So let's get right into it and let's talk a little bit about branches. So we've seen branches decrease over time. That's happened, the past several years. However, some data seems to be suggesting that bank branches are either staying about the same level or might be increasing a little bit. Do you kind of see a decrease or increase of bank branches on the horizon, in your opinion?
Um, it's a nuanced question,
Mm,
Brad. I think what we have to realize is at the moment the numbers look stable.
mhm,
My personal belief is that over time those numbers will continue to drift down.
mhm.
But the thing we need to look at underneath the numbers is that even if the number is staying the same, it doesn't mean that those are the same branches.
Mhm.
So, as banks continue to find efficiencies and to optimize their networks, branches that may not be profitable are being consolidated, especially in overlapping markets.
Sure.
And at the same time, those banks are opening up more targeted experience centers that
Mm,
focus more on the needs of that immediate market, be it business to business or wealth management. But just because the numbers are staying relatively flat doesn't mean that we're talking about the same branches.
Sure. Yes, we definitely have seen a lot more specialized branches, and especially the drift towards more of those experiential centers, those advice centers, as we like to talk about. So, can we talk a little bit about some customer experience issues? So, what are some of those customer experience issues that banks really struggled with in the previous year, 2024, that you see carrying over into this year, 2025?
Thank you for the question. One of the things that seems to be really interesting to me, and I've seen this emerge some, is the idea of digital fatigue.
Mm,
As banks have gone through the process of digital transformation, in some cases, cobbling together different pieces of the app from different suppliers,
right.
more and more customers who now are trying to learn the technology are getting to a point where they need to answer a question and they don't know how to answer it.
Mm,
And it is tiring and it is frustrating and there's nowhere to go. And when they
right.
attempt to find someone to answer that question, that person may not be able to really help them because the
Mm,
question needs a higher level of advice. So, my first issue that's a carryover issue is as we become more digital, how do we make sure that that experience is staying as simple as possible,
right.
especially for people who are not digital natives and
Mm,
are trying to pick up these skills as they go? Another issue that I'm seeing is really proactive engagement. Banks have the best data, I think, of any industry in the world,
sure.
but they're not fully using it. So the bank should be able to anticipate, wow, this customer's accounts and transaction flow really is different and not in a good way from what it has been in the past. How can we reach out to that customer and help them? That data's there,
Right.
but is it fully being utilized? So making full use of the data that's available to you is
Mhm.
another servicing opportunity that banks really have. Another, and one more, is the transitions of service in a fluid channel or omni-channel environment.
Mhm.
So if I need to start some type of transaction online, I need to finish it with a human being.
Mhm.
Will that human being know what I've done and be able to pick up that transaction and finish it for me? So transitions within omnichannel environments are also
Yes.
places that banks can continue to improve their delivery.
Right. I think that's a great point because I mean, we've all been through experiences, whether in a bank or somewhere else, where we had to reach out for a concern and they might have directed us to someone else, and then we had to give the same information multiple times. So it's a frustrating experience for sure. So digging a little bit more to digital banking, where do you see like the biggest trends in digital banking right now, in your opinion?
There's an obvious answer, and I'm going to avoid the obvious answer for the moment.
Hmm.
The one of the trends I think we need to be watching very, very carefully is embedded finance hubs, which
Mm,
is through a third party app. So Uber or
sure.
Shopify or one of the apps in which the merchant or the driver or someone needs to interface directly with their bank. So instead of having to leave the Shopify app or
Hmm.
leave the Uber app, they are able to, through an API, directly access some aspects of their financial services. So that integration of financial services within the app will be a stream of revenue for the bank and an improvement of service for the customer. What
Hmm.
it needs to make sure we don't forget is that the bank can get lost in that.
Right.
I had someone that I was close to refer to that as being a dumb pipe.
I like
How
that
do we make
analogy.
sure that we don't become dumb pipes inside other companies' apps, but we maintain our identity and we make certain that the customer knows that we are providing this service through whatever. And then the most obvious answer is artificial intelligence.
Of course.
And when I think about artificial intelligence, I'm not really, you can take two paths with AI.
Hmm.
One is a lot of companies have taken very traditional analytical tools and have rebranded it AI and
Hmm.
tripled the price for it. That's not really AI. That's just pricing strategy.
Right.
At the end of the day, if you look at the large language models, the generative AI, the ability to use those tools as a companion in your decisioning process should provide a real benefit to the sales staff and the servicing staff in the branches and in the call centers. It should be a good companion for the customer. It should help with personalization, which I think continues to be a huge opportunity for the banks.
Right.
And it should also help with things like fraud protection and identity verification. So the obvious answer is AI. We just have to make sure that we validate the information that those models are built on.
Right, precisely. So I wanted to circle back a little bit to talk about branches because you talked a little bit about many of the branches that are still around, they're different or they're changing. So what do you see as some of like the bigger branch trends right now? What's going on with branches?
I think we've already used the label. We're seeing a shift from transaction centers to experience centers,
Hmm.
and those experience centers are going to focus not on the teller line. Now, my personal belief is that we need to provide teller service on an ongoing
Hmm.
basis, whether that is a physical teller line with fewer tellers, or as we've seen some banks do, have the desk staff capable
Mm,
of performing the teller transaction. There's a number of
sure.
ways to make that work. So I don't think we can fully lose the teller, as we'll talk, um, especially in more rural
Hmm.
environments, in markets serving an older population. But that experience center idea where you're getting advice on complex transactions, you're getting advice on planning, and it becomes more of an advisory center
Sure.
with a staff that is trained for those types of interactions. I think that's the biggest thing we're seeing with the branches. And you and I were somewhat ahead of the curve a few years ago when we had a conversation
Hmm.
about the branch as community hub,
Right.
the branch being of the community and not just in the community.
Mm.
And we called out that the branch and the bank could especially provide a community center function and a liquidity center function
Hmm.
during times of crises. We've transcended or are transcending that just in times of crises situation
Right.
where the branch as a advisory center and experience center can really be a community center
Hmm.
for an expanded set of interactions, and the
Sure.
branch can embed itself and be a valued part of the community.
Right. Yeah, I agree. That definitely helps it stand out from the competition and neobanks and things like that. So, as we see branches kind of transition to these new models, there's these renovated spaces, a little bit more open space, perhaps. How can they maintain that same level of customer service for perhaps older or rural customers who are really more used to the teller line or the more traditional way of banking, like we were discussing a little bit a few minutes ago?
Yeah, you know what I think we really have to be careful about is not looking at a one branch design model fitting all.
Hmm.
So, yeah, that may work great in an environment that is high traffic, a lot of very simple transactions. The answers to the questions don't really involve a lot of personal information. But in those environments, especially, and not just the rural, not just the
Hmm.
older, but in situations where you are converting from a transaction center to an experience center, and the experience center is going to be more dedicated to, say, the management of your wealth,
Hmm.
then you don't want to have that conversation standing out on the floor with 50 other people standing around you.
Oh, exactly.
You need to have that conversation in private, in a place where you feel safe and secure, and you're able
Hmm.
to be open and transparent and not guarded. So the banks need to be very careful in the designs they choose to serve the intent of the branch as experience center.
Hmm.
In rural environments, especially rural environments in which there is dramatic space between branches. So
Sure.
if I'm going to have to drive 20 miles to this branch, then I need to make sure everything I need to do can be handled in that visit.
Hmm.
So in those situations, I think we need to see more traditional tellers,
Right.
and we need to be able to upskill the staff in those branches to provide a broad spectrum of servicing complex transactions.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And that kind of ties a little bit into one of our last questions. So, banks really want to empower their employees to be able to deliver that good customer service. But those employees also have to deal with concerns over AI and, maybe self-service kiosks, maybe impacting their jobs, potentially taking away their jobs. So how can banks really empower employees to deliver that good service in branch to all sorts of customers amid concerns over, AI taking their job or something like that?
And that's a legitimate concern. The banks are going to have to answer the question, what is the use that I am going to put artificial intelligence to?
Hmm.
Is it a expanding the skills and delivery of my staff, or
Hmm.
is it a replacement for my staff? And you can't really mask that that's going to be a real business question that many banks are going to have to deal with.
Sure.
For me, AI is an extension of human capability,
Hmm.
not a replacement for human capability.
Right.
And if that's the strategy the bank wants to embrace, then they need to be transparent and open about that.
Hmm.
We're going to provide you with AI driven tools that make you a better advisor. We're going to provide you with these tools that will make your life easier because you can find information faster.
Right.
Not this is going to replace you.
Yeah.
So, in that environment, that means we have to reskill, we have to upskill the branch staff. And the branch staff, then, because they've taken on greater responsibility, you may have to pay them more.
Right.
So this isn't going to be a play that reduces personnel expense, but because your staff is doing more sophisticated stuff, you may have to license them and you have to pay them more. Now,
Right.
another issue in all of this is that as we move from transaction centers to experience centers, as customers become more and more comfortable doing those everyday transactions digitally,
Hmm.
the people who will be coming into the branch are more likely to be stressed.
Right.
There's been a fraud event, there's been a mistake. I am going to need to change something in a trust. I need advice on retirement and wealth
Mm.
planning. I need to sell you my business pitch so you will give my company a loan.
Mm.
And those aren't going to be as broken up by
Right.
everyday transactions as they used to be. You're just going to get a continuous stream of stress.
Mm.
So, not only as we are training our branch staff to deal with complex transactions and nuanced types of financial services, we're going to have to provide them with better mental health training skills
Mm.
so that they can
Absolutely.
manage that consistency of a stressed customer, because that's who is now more likely to be in the branch as the
Sure.
percent of regular transactions decline.
Yeah, and that's definitely going to impact, turnover rates if that's not done to be
Yeah.
able to manage that stress. So before we sign off today, Mac, I want to give you an opportunity. Is there anything else you'd like to add about anything we've talked about today?
Just really to redress some of the things we've already discussed. It's very important, I believe, for branches and banks to continue to take a people first point of view.
Hmm.
So tech enables the people, tech doesn't replace the people.
Absolutely.
As we mentioned earlier, banks have a wealth of data. They know so much about customer transactions,
Hmm.
customers' interactions with other merchants. There is so much that they can do to improve on a proactive basis the quality of the experience that the customer receives.
Hmm.
But they have to ramp up their data analytics and their applications of data science to really meet a personalization need that hasn't fully been met yet.
Hmm.
Many of the banks I see believing that if they build next most likely product or next most likely action models, that they are sophisticated. Those things have existed for 50 years.
Right.
We need to move past that to using data for proactive personalization.
Hmm.
We also haven't talked about things like blockchain.
Oh, yes, of
So,
course.
blockchain as a technology could replace many, many banking functions. And we need to think about how the banks actively leverage blockchain for identity verification, for
Hmm.
smart contracts, for real time payments, as opposed to allowing fintechs and neobanks to replace them through a more wisely used application of blockchain technology.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you for bringing up blockchain because that's obviously been top of mind for many people. Even Bank of America's CEO was recently talking about it. So yes, thank you so much, Mac, for having you on, for being on today. And I want to thank all our listeners for listening to the Bank Customer Experience Podcast. Thank you so much.
Brad, thank you, and just let me know whenever you would like to have me back.
Of course. Thank you.